Hey everybody, it's Sid Sexton and my good friend Keith Glines with another quick hit on the Overlap podcast. And if you're new to the Overlap podcast or tuning back in for the first time in a while, the Overlap podcast is the discussion, the study of the overlaps within life, and that's fitness, family, work, parenting, management. And how you show up for the workout is how you're going to show up at work, and how you show up at work is how you're going to show up at home, and vice versa. And really getting better in one aspect of life can and should help you become better in other aspects of life, or all aspects of life. And then, at the same time, and I don't mention this ever, I think, is that I feel like progress in life is sort of an escalator, and if you're not moving forward, and this is probably my own personal opinion on this, so don't send all your hate mail to Keith, that if you're on an escalator and it's moving down, so if you're not trying to move up, you're actually losing ground and becoming stagnant in all areas of life, or one area of life, you end up getting atrophy, I guess. And so that's kind of why I like the life we live, and I like, that's really what this podcast is all about, and it's really why I like the guests we have on today.
Thanks, Sid and Keith, for allowing me this opportunity to explain why Pro 356 Consulting is back, again, sponsoring and supporting the Overlap podcast. Number one, I just have found that this is a great podcast, that I share your values of the overlap concept, and I have found just so many great nuggets from listening to you guys. Number two is, I remember when you approached me at Hatch about starting a podcast, and I said, hey, that's why we built that podcasting studio at Coastal, and you guys took it up, and here we are. You've done 100 broadcasts, and now you're on the way to 200. And lastly, I just want to say that I just appreciate the way you guys do business, and I want to associate with you. So Pro 356 is glad to be back as a promoter and sponsor of the Overlap podcast.
Hey guys, this is Keith. Let me break down a scenario for you. Are you a business owner that is overwhelmed by the options of investing, but you're being told you need to invest in retirement, you need to invest in mutual funds, you need to buy some single stocks? Well, I have your fix. C2 Wealth Strategies, ran by our friend Wes Cody. Their website is c2wealth.com. If you are looking at investing at all and are confused by it, give them a call today. They will be happy to handle whatever you need. He's brought up very specific things that I need to be working on as a business owner in my investing life. Let him do that same thing for you. c2wealth.com, or go to the overlaplife.com page and click on sponsors.
And so I'd like to welcome Rick Miller back to the podcast studio, but then also back to the supporting role. How would you say that, Keith?
As our very first sponsor.
Coming back.
He came back. He canceled us for a while.
Well, he was getting focused,
he got focused and came back. And so,
I think it's because we kept shouting him out. He was like, God, I feel obligated. These guys.
We guilted him back into it, which was, we will use guilt if needed.
Well, and I feel like it was all genuine, because if you look out in life, man, I want to be Rick Miller when I grow up.
Yeah, you and me both.
And
Have you seen him swim?
Rick is constantly doing something, constantly innovating something. He's setting up golf tournaments. He's swimming in the mornings. He's running innovation portals and whatnot, under different names. And it's just reading constantly, adding clients, teaching, coaching. I mean, he's the man. And so welcome
when
back.
You see him in the coffee shop, you grab him by the neck and push him into the studio. And that's what we did today.
You don't really have to twist Rick's arm to come and talk.
No, you don't. So welcome, Rick.
Welcome.
Well, thank you. And that was the hardest 1 minute I've ever had, because I wasn't able to speak over you guys.
Yeah,
especially,
well, I heard you trying to, and we just went for it some more.
Well, I appreciate it. And, of course, you do use guilt very well, because as your first sponsor, and I'll explain why I did that and why I'm happy to be back, I remember those first few podcasts, which I was excited that you guys were starting, talking about, we love doing this, but, it sure would be fun if we had a sponsor.
Yeah.
And you guys would laugh about it. And I kept hearing that. And I said, okay, Holy Spirit said, you need to sponsor these guys for a couple of reasons. One is I enjoyed when you guys came out of the blocks. I enjoyed it. I listened to it and said, I know these guys. Let me see if they're any good. And I was sitting there getting captivated by the way that you guys interact. And then it hit me, the overlap. Gosh, my consulting practice, I tell all my clients, balance is more important than speed. And I spend a lot of time trying to get them to focus on not only their work, but their family and their recreation, all the things that you talk about.
Community, spiritual.
Yeah, all
I
that
remember.
stuff. And so I looked at it and said, man, this is the perfect fit. And if I'm going to do any marketing, who would I want to do it with than two guys that I know and I like and I trust, and they're good together. So I said, what the heck? Let me just start doing it. And, the reality was I got totally blessed. I got clients from this initially. And because I got clients, I got so busy. I said, let me take a break and focus on that because I want to see what do I need to do now that I'm too busy thanks to the overlap. And now I'm back because
And good work, obviously.
Well, I think it's more that it occurs to me as this is part of something that Hatch, that entrepreneurial tech center, started. We wanted to do podcasting, and you guys took us up on it. And I said, I need to keep promoting that because I think you are the poster child for what can happen when two entrepreneurs decide we need to do something, and you did it. And you're still doing it. And I said, I want to support that because that's just the right thing for me to do. And as I said, I just enjoy listening to you guys every week and teach me to walk into a coffee shop this morning.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for being our first sponsor. Thank you for sticking with us. Thank you you do share our stuff, with your clients and with other people. You've got an email list. I'm on it. You send the stuff out. It's pretty great. It's a little humbling and a little nerve wracking too. I'm like, oh man, I don't know these people. They're going to hear us and think we're dodos, but oh well. I do appreciate the support, and but hey, thanks for being on this morning because we were talking about a concept this morning that I think would be a really good quick hit, and that is we were talking results are downstream of culture.
Yeah, and you were saying, okay, is there anything you were thinking about? And this is really what I've been working with, thinking about, and sharing with people, and that is. Andrew Breitbart is giving credit for the statement that politics is downstream from culture. And obviously on the political scene, we're not going there, but there's just a lot going on. And it's all about, when you step back from it, is what culture do you want in this country? Well, when you think about business, what I was saying was that as a leader, and you know this, Sid and Keith, that as you move up in the organization, you spend less time on the technical parts of how you run the business and more about how do I create the culture? Because the culture is the guardrails of your business. And if you do it right, you get the results you want. And so, most leaders think that they're doing it because they're good at their niche. But the reality is a great leader is one who's focused on making sure that the culture keeps maintained because society shifts and it's easy to start with the culture and then find it drift away. And then you wonder, where'd the results go?
Yeah.
So
so here's some culture questions that come to mind. And culture, for better or for worse, it's one of those terms that's really thrown around a lot. But let's, in this topic in this time we have, like let's kind of hone in a little bit, like how do we define culture, like in your mind?
In my mind, the term that everybody kicks around that's somewhat synonymous is core values.
Okay.
And you've got 3 to 5 of those, whether it be honesty and integrity. But to me, the culture is one where when you take a word like honesty, how do you translate that? In other words, what we do, what we say is what we do. So you put a sentence behind that everybody in your organization says, yeah, that's what we do. And I think when you define your culture, it's got to be, the other parameter to me is, this is so important, I'm willing to go out of business rather than violate it. Because when people realize that, and there's certain things that you have a culture in your family.
Yeah.
Your culture and your family is what your kids are saying, okay, this is the rules that mom and dad set up, and they aren't willing to change them.
Yeah, make your bed in the morning.
And when you start breaking your culture because you're not walking the talk,
Yeah,
your teenagers and your employees notice it.
yeah.
So if you're not
Culture
willing,
starts to slip then? Is
yeah,
that what you're saying? Okay.
I think so.
I agree with you.
And I can base it on my own personal life that I may talk the talk, but when it slides, like we were saying with some difficult situations, I usually have to go back and said, wait a minute, I'm the one that wasn't consistent.
Yeah.
I didn't keep the core values that I said I had. And so when you have them, though, what I've seen is if you just define them and stay on them and keep making sure you tweak them for whatever changes this society throws at you, you get the results you want. And when you don't, we all know the other side of that.
Well, the flip side also is when you tout a certain culture or that your company has a certain culture and you don't hold those values, people will call you out.
Yeah. Yeah, you look pretty hypocritical, and everyone's looking for hypocrisy, right? I mean,
and they're waiting to call it out. And the same in the family. There's been times when I said, we're going to do this, and then didn't do that, and then my kid said,
yeah,
hey, Pops, you said we were going to do this, and this is the way we were going to live. We've really not been living like that.
Yeah, the teenager test is pretty hard because teenagers watch you, and they are so good at catching you when you're not walking the walk.
Yeah, they are. And they love to do it too because you call them out so much.
But you don't realize it's sticking on them because as you become more consistent, they may argue with you, but you find it, and you and I know some of the stuff that our parents tried to walk the walk on, we may have resisted, but now that we're older, we see it's stuck.
Oh my goodness, yeah, like so many things.
Yeah. Well, the overlap there too is team members as well. So how many times have I walked in my office and said, this is what we're going to do from now on?
Well,
and then they were like, well, I thought that's what we were going to do from now on.
Yeah.
I mean, I had this last night, but I won't go into it with my wife over core values. But one thing I found...
That side of the table always talks about their wife.
Yeah. I know, Jordan. So, we'll go into the drinking game.
I can't. Yeah. Give us your perspective, speaking of drinking game. Go ahead.
What I was going to share was, and you guys know this because I've heard you talk about it on the podcast, and that is, I'm amazed at how many people do not have interview questions tied to their core values.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds so simple, but most people will interview and they're looking at the skill sets, and so we say, okay, they got the skills, but do they really fit in terms of, do they have the values? And that is where taking the time to ask open-ended questions with the goal being, okay, this is value number one. Here's my open-ended question that will give me a sense, does this person have my values? Because I know you guys know this. Anybody can fake it for 90 days.
Oh, everyone's a rock star for the first 3 weeks.
Are you honest? Of course I'm honest. Do you have integrity? Yes.
Yeah.
Tell me a situation, if this came up, what would you do?
Yeah.
In other words, there's a way that you interview people to make sure that you're not messing up your culture internally.
Yeah. So if I recap your, and fun fact, you were talking about questions for interviews. I got them right there. I just pulled them up on the screen and Keith saw them.
Man,
Sid always loves when he does something that he feels good about.
Folks, you got to get in this studio because it has come so far. I'm looking at this screen and thinking, man, great. I am in a big time recording studio.
Yeah, and a couple of knuckleheads from South Alabama are utilizing it.
We're big time, Rick.
We are not, but it sounds good. But So back to culture. Culture, if I reinterpret what you were saying, is defining how we behave, communicating that to your team, and then trying to hold them accountable to that.
And accountability starts with them seeing it in you first.
Okay, so modeling the culture, then coaching them up, because people like to do things because they feel good about it, not because they feel bad about it. I've heard that before from someone. And then, holding them accountable to those standards, if you will, setting some standards, and then guarding the culture by being mindful about who's on the team, and making sure you're not adding some culture killers to the team.
Sure. And EOS 90, which we all
I
in
was
this
about to
room
get
love.
there. Yeah.
One of the things that they've encouraged everyone to do is when you start doing those quarterly or annual evaluations of your team,
Quarterly conversations. Yeah.
is, you list them down there on that people analyzer and you put those core values across the columns and you rate them.
Yeah.
And that is maybe one of the best ways I've seen to make sure that you keep your culture pure.
And it's there's not a whole lot of wiggle room in that, which I didn't like at first, but I've learned to accept it because it forces me to make a tougher decision on, one of the core values, accountability. Is it a plus? They always exemplify it. Plus minus, they sometimes exemplify the accountability, and we describe accountability as doing what's right even though you don't feel like it, because you're holding up our end of the deal for the team.
Yeah.
Something like that along those lines. I'm
Well,
rapping on that.
I'm glad you got that down.
Yeah, I got that one down. Well, my brain's going towards the people analyzer, but plus minus, and then minus is never. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Or no, it says rarely, something like that. So they might do it a few times, but you got to score them on a quarterly basis, and they're scoring themselves. You're scoring them. You get to have a conversation about the core values. I also think that in this deal, it's sometimes people just don't line up with those core values, and that's okay. It doesn't make them a bad person. It just makes them a bad fit for your organization.
Well, yeah, and you know me, I'm a reader, so crucial conversations comes into this.
That's a good one.
Everybody can do the sheet.
Mm-hmm.
It's what you do with the sheet that's hard. In other words, somebody's got 3 pluses, 1 plus or minus, and a minus.
Mm-hmm.
You still have to have that conversation with them to talk about that. And sometimes you'd rather just say, it's easier for me to focus on my 3 pluses. I'm going to ignore the 1 minus because you're still on the team. But the reality is, if there's a minus, as a leader who's trying to be in charge of culture, you've got to have that conversation, even when you know it's not comfortable.
Yeah, it's not good. We need to work on this. Help me understand what seems to be the holdup. And they'll go, well, you help me understand where I'm missing on that. And I'm like, okay, well, these are the areas.
Yeah.
And they'll go, well, this person or that person. I'm like, okay, well, how could we handle that? You get to dig a little deeper. Sometimes it's them. Sometimes it's the system. Sometimes it's sometimes it's a positional issue, maybe it's the right person in the wrong seat and they don't like where they're at anyways, so they're just dropping the ball in that arena. But to your point, it is, it's the conversation that allows you to get to a better future.
And it's something that, let me give you an example I ran into this morning. I won't mention the company, but them where they made a big change. They sold off some of their parts of their company, and some of the people left it from another part because they were tied to that one. And they wished them well, no big deal. Well, 2-3 months passed, they came back. And what they came back for said, I didn't appreciate it, but what I really missed was, in essence, they start their meetings with prayer. But that was part of their culture. And they said, I realized after 2 or 3 months of every meeting, nothing like that happening, that I really did appreciate the culture. So culture is both something that's a guide rail, but it's a magnet. It will draw people to you,
that's a good one.
and it will draw people back to you. And if it's a negative culture, it'll send people away that they don't fit. So people self-select, and you might as well use culture as a strategic advantage.
Yeah. Another thing about culture is that if you're not positive, if you're not actively fostering culture, it starts to morph and to drift into something else. And culture is sort of like water. It'll go to the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
And then it ends up being something else. And that's probably not what you want. If you're not intentional about your culture, you're going to get a culture and it's not going to be what you want.
And we can talk about also in hiring right now with millennials and Zers, and they look more than the compensation. They look for the culture.
Yeah, they're looking for
Amen.
fit. They're
Yeah.
looking for place.
They
you
want to
know?
feel they're making a difference no matter what.
Yeah.
And I think everyone does.
Yeah, they're just more vocal about it. You
Yeah,
know.
they are. Yeah.
I got a question for Keith.
Okay.
When it comes to culture, you deal with people whose business is being in the culture, artists and that type of group, and you deal with a lot of them. And so my question is, do you see people creating culture the way we're talking about it in the culture artistic world? I mean, can you think of examples of that?
I don't think in the creative space it happens so much like that. I think originality becomes culture. And what I mean by that is the culture that everyone wants comes from someone being original in their own skin.
Right.
And so if you look at think of the artists that you think about that stand out. They're original and they're comfortable in their own skin. And so I think just as in the creative space, in the corporate space, if we can help businesses become original and comfortable in their own skin, then a culture flows out of that that everybody wants.
So that's your niche.
Right.
You know, and an artist, it's their niche, but in a business, it's being comfortable that this is what we're really good at.
Originality sells. And so I think I know that to create a culture within anything, your family, your business, or anything, people are drawn to originality and you being comfortable in your skin.
Any other questions?
Yeah. How do you think this relates to this whole concept of cancel culture?
Oof, I don't know. I don't know that I've given that any thought.
Because what I wonder about is, given that that's in a political space, does that filter into how people deal with business? You know, where people are afraid to say something because they're afraid they may get canceled. And so to me, inside a company, culture's got to include the ability for people to communicate and to have differences without the fear that comes that, you know, underlying a cancel culture is I'm going to make you afraid to say something. And I think in businesses, oftentimes it's easy to get to where you say you've got a culture, but are people willing to speak up and challenge things in a group, you know, and are they comfortable in their own skin on a team? In other words, can you've got a team where can they argue? Can they go, I disagree with you, Sid? You know, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And if that's part of your culture, then that's a great culture, as opposed to, well, yeah, but if the leader's going to say this, then I better just bite my tongue.
Yeah. So open and honest, or closed and whatever the opposite is, dictative, you know?
Yeah, saying you have a culture and then living it is two different things. Saying you have a culture of open, honest communication. How many times do you hear that in business?
Yeah.
We have open, honest communication. Do you really? Can your people really be, or could your customers really be open and honest and you take it?
You know, one of the great things to do is to survey your team or survey your stakeholders if you've got clients and say, okay, tell me what our culture is.
Yeah. So so here's how we came up with culture. And did you read The Advantage by Pat Lancioni? And that's what really kind of, because you hear culture and I couldn't quite figure out how do you like set that down. And so the leadership team just followed his rules, which were, let's identify, you know, and everyone nominated 3 people. And there was like 5 people on the leadership team at the time. So there was a possibility of 15 people, but it ended up being there were 4 people that everyone chose, you know, with the overlaps, no pun intended on that. And so out of those 4 people that everyone chose, you just picked out of those 4 people, what were 3 or 4 attributes that we admired about them, what made them successful. And that's really how we got honed in on, this is really our culture, you know, this is really the people that are successful here. These are what they do. These are the people that sort of embody that. And we're like, okay, that's what we're doing, you know? And we got to kind of honing in on that. uh, that culture, and that's somewhat of a survey, but it's a little bit more, observational than people and maybe this is in the blue collar industry. It's a little bit harder to get some introspective views on what is our culture, because
Well,
you will get some crass.
I did it with the manufacturing hourly employee group, and we had a big board, and we got to vote. And of course, out of 30 employees,
Yeah.
4 of them said, okay, let's pick the weirdest one of these, and they put all their 5 votes on that
Oh,
one and tried
yeah.
to rig it. But in general, what I find is when you can take that overlap that you were talking about, and you boil them down to the 3 to 5. Can you write a sentence about what that means inside your company that every employee could
Mhm.
read and understand?
Yeah.
EOS walks you through
I
that.
was about to say, man, and really, we're talking about culture, and we're talking about protecting it, and we're talking about setting it up and fostering it, and I struggled with that, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of a culture warrior
Yeah.
until I really found EOS and the tools within it that really created the framework for being able to foster the culture that we want, keep reinforcing it with the VTO and quarterly
Core.
conversations, quarterly meetings with, different departments, and then annual meetings with the leadership team and setting targets. It's just culture's in your face all the time, and then it forces you to talk about culture and your core values in the hiring process. Hence, this whole sheet that I'm showing,
Yeah.
and it really is the framework that allows me to stay focused on it, because it's easy to take my eye off the ball of culture. But if it's embedded in the system that we're operating out of, I don't have to worry about it and try to remember, oh, in 2 weeks I got to do that. It's just in there.
Well, as your organization grows, if you think about it, if everybody on your team showed up and they exhibited your core values, your
Mm.
culture in the way they go about doing their performance that day, what do you think will happen to your company?
Oh, man.
Everybody has a day where they are 5 for 5 on culture.
Yeah.
You want to have a camera on them to put a video out there to show the world this is who my company is. And then they have the other days. But if you have everybody there, what we started with was results are downstream from culture. That when you have culture right and everybody gets it, you won't get every day everyone performing, but the days that they are performing, man, you will get the results you want without you having to create another procedure, another training video. If they're living it and they're walking it, people notice.
Yeah.
I like what
It's a
you
magnet.
said. That was good stuff. But I really like what you said earlier, and this goes back to what you guys were just talking about, is that culture is the guardrails of business. So the guardrails keep people on the path. And so your culture, as you build it, think about it as keeping people on the path to what the initial goal is or the core values are, right?
And the more successful you are, the more time of your time should be on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Well, and and you sort of started that at the beginning, was like, the higher you get up in the organization, and really, to sort of break that down for the listener, is like the more layers of management that get developed within your organization. You go from 20 team members to 50 to 70 to 100. You're getting further and further away from the frontline work. The more and more you should be focused on creating an environment that fosters that culture, so the frontline work actually gets done. And again, back to EOS, it's the best tool that I found to do that. Now, are you ready for the overlap? So here's the overlap. So if people are going to join your team, right, and
Yeah.
they're hiring, you're hiring for culture, you're doing all the stuff, and you're recruiting and you're advertising, you're trying to get people to come, leave the job that they're at and come join in your team.
Yep.
I feel like, as a business owner, operator, whatever, culture advocate, is that it's my responsibility to help them see that these are the core values that we embody, and if they embody as an organization, so the organization can be successful. But not just that. I don't want you to embody that to just so I will be successful and this your department will be successful. But if you live by these, you will have a better life.
Yeah.
If you show up and have a positive mental attitude, every day, people want to work around you. You know what I'm saying? You're attracting good behavior. If you're accountable, there's not a bunch of excuses. You either you showed up late, that's on you. You just own it and move on. If you have humility, you're able to be taught, you're able to admit faults, and you're able to learn from mistakes. You're going to be better. If you're goal focused, you're helping the team achieve those goals. You set your own goals for the week or the month or the quarter or whatever. You're going to be a better human. You're going to be successful. And if you have grit, if you're able to grind it out when it's hot, when it's cold, when it's wet, when it's dry, you get some toughness about you. You're going to be a better human.
Okay, now you got me into tiny habits.
There you go. I knew we would land there at some point.
Yeah, exactly right. You've got to celebrate little victories in culture.
Yeah.
Because culture is easy to put into words. The reason it's important, and it's a guardrail, it's that important that you're going to bounce into it. Guardrails are important because people get off track and they veer toward them and they hit them. In order to keep people realizing that the struggle, the bouncing off those rails, because somebody will be struggled with an issue of accountability, because sometimes it's easier to point the finger than it is to look in the mirror.
It really is.
So when you have people on your team and you want to get them to realize that if they live this, they're going to be better, they're going to feel happier and be more balanced and all that stuff, you got to celebrate their little victories.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it's the rest of the world will tell them, no, that's not important. Accountability, grit, yeah, that's sounds good, but no, you hear enough of those signals to where inside your culture, you've got to be an advocate, or the team's got to keep celebrating people to where they realize, hey, I am making progress. I am living these values. And when you do, then you've got joy because deep down you're being the best you can be.
Yeah. You're fostering more of that behavior by celebrating those little victories. And I would say, man, it can't be just like you're hearing this podcast and you're going, oh, okay, that's what we're going to do now. You better be a system. You better create a system that every week on Monday morning, maybe perhaps in your every person meeting from 7 to 7:30. I'm just saying hypothetically.
Hypothetically.
I've never seen it done. Yeah. Actually, I have. That if a customer calls in, you make a note. If they mention Rick's name because he did a great job, let's make a note of that. And then let's celebrate that in the Monday morning meeting in front of everyone and let everyone hear that Miss Jones called and said Rick came out to her place and the yard has never looked so good. Thank you so much, Rick. And then we put them into a little bucket. And at the end of the month, whoever's got the most of them, gets a prize. And you're just encouraging that type of behavior.
Yeah. And let's say it's your quality is an issue. So you've got a meeting and you realize you worked with an artist and they kept giving you okay, but it wasn't that good. And so Austin stays up all night and keeps editing and editing till he gets it down pat. So you want to encourage him to say that, hey, I noticed that you were living our values. And so we always talk about, catching people doing something right. Catching people living the culture is another form of that I just thought of. Thank you for what you were going through because it just popped in. Point being is you got to let people know when they're exhibiting the culture that you want, that you notice it.
Yeah.
Same in our families.
Amen.
Amen.
I mean, same with the kids.
Amen.
Is how often do I only celebrate my kids when they do big stuff? Why should I? And I think a lot of times we push our kids to do really big stuff, but we don't celebrate the small things that get them there. And they quit doing the big stuff. They quit striving for the big thing.
Yeah. Well, and the whole tiny habit concept is like those little tiny habits is what ends up building to be the muscles to achieve the big thing. That anything big starts with something little anyways.
Yeah, but I really had, so when I was working with Rick last year, he was really encouraging me to celebrate those little victories. And and I really struggled with that. I struggled with Hey, when I did something right in the morning, when I made my coffee right or something to celebrate. And you know I did. You would get on me.
No, I'm laughing because I'm thinking what I'm expecting to hear on some future podcasts is, you know, I had Juba in this position for 2 seconds before he flipped me, pinned me, and did all this.
Oh,
And then I know,
Scott and I have been talking about that a lot.
but when you get those 2 seconds, I want you to come off the mat and celebrate to where Juba's looking at you going, what are you doing? I'm celebrating. I got you for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, it's happening. It's happening. He knows. But then he crushes me. And then I can't breathe.
But I do think,
he lets me know who's boss.
With your kids, you can always, you can reinforce the culture and just remind them of that in little things that you do to celebrate. So, I got this grandson that starts names with a C, and I had this standing joke with him. I said, hey, Carson, have I told you today that I love you? And he'll always laugh back, no. I said, I'm going to get better. Okay. So we have this little game, and all I'm doing is reinforcing the culture that I want him to know that he's loved and appreciated within the family. And it's just a little game, but it's something that we celebrate because that's one of our values that we hope is part of the culture of being in, one of the Miller men.
Yeah.
And so everything you do, you can joke around about, with your team, whether they're, in the field or in the studio, and they'll get it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Man, that is a master class and discussion on culture, setting and fostering and nurturing and holding accountable and building up and reinforcing culture, which ends up being the type of behaviors that you want yourself first and your team, your organization to exhibit. And that's really equals that's down, what'd you say, downstream of that are the results that your client is really looking for. And really that's what makes you proud for your team. That's what creates pride and joy in your work.
I mean, at the end of the day, we all want to be noticed for something.
Yeah.
And if you're helping people live a life where they're going to be noticed for the cultures that you've helped them work and exist in, they're going to feel good about that, and they're going to feel good about you. And that is worth way more than the financial results that you think we're all aiming at. But at the end of the day, when someone comes up and said, you were really a great influence on my life, my overlapping life, worth way more than the dollars.
Way more. That's the goal I'm looking for. And, for those that are really fixated on financial gains, you can always tie that into Zig Ziglar. And he said, and I'll never forget this. And when I heard it, and I'm sure he said it in like 1970 or something, like if you help enough people in life get what they want, you ultimately get what you want out of life. And I'm like, oh my goodness, all I got to do is be helpful. All I got to do is be helpful, and I'll get what I want out of life, and it has been true. So thank you for being on. Thank you for supporting the podcast. Thank you for being a mentor to both of us. Thank you for helping the community, and thank you for being a shining example of what it can be like for us as we move forward through life.
And I'm going to record this, or I'm going to send it to my wife.
Okay. I'll actually go tell her.
This side of the table.
I'll go. I know her and I like her. I will go and tell her, hey, you should be so proud. Do you know who you're married to?
No.
That's right.
And then she might throw something at me.
Guys, this is always fun for me. I appreciate it. And I just want to say that I underestimate. I said you're on your way to 200. I think you're on your way to 1,000.
Oh my God, I don't know. I don't know if we can be consistent enough for that.
God, when we get there, Sid'll be old.
I'm already there. Well, thanks again, Keith. Any final thoughts as the creative one?
No, that's awesome. This was awesome today. I have no creativity to add. It was pretty creative.
Keith's over there taking notes.
That's right.
I heard him typing away. All right. Well, thanks again. It ends up being not so much of a quick hit, but that's okay. It was a good discussion, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you are getting value from these podcasts. We're enjoying doing it, and man, please share. please share these with friends, family, someone you, coworkers, someone you think that might benefit from the free podcast. And speaking of them being free, thanks to folks like Rick and all of our other great sponsors that allow us to continue to do this, because there is actually expense in editing and getting it out and all of that stuff, some of the equipment and things like that. So if it did cost us about $100 an episode like it was whenever we started, I don't know that we'd be at 120 episodes or whatever we are now. So I really appreciate the sponsors. And really, you know, we wouldn't have any sponsors. We wouldn't have a podcast if people didn't listen. So thank you guys very much. Anything else? Peace. Okay, guys, everyone knows if you're a business owner, a business leader, or you're just a person in the world needing help with accounting, you need a real partner. You need someone that's going to listen to you and not just plug numbers in to make their job easy to do your taxes. At least that's what I want. I've been through a lot of accountants in my life, and I have yet to find one even remotely as good as Johnny Baranco. He's the owner of Baranco and Associates, and he's the kind of guy that really doesn't manipulate your books to make his job easier. He really is trying to give you insights into your business or into your financial planning world. Whatever your goals are, he's there to help. And so I just encourage you to give him a call. Baranco and Associates, look him up online. It's barancoandassociates.com, and just see if he can help you. He really is the accountant that I recommend to everyone, even before he was a sponsor of the podcast. So please, if you need an accountant, just do yourself a favor and give him a call. Let me tell you about one of our sponsors, Chris Drogmiller. He's with CMD Fencing. One, I really appreciate his support to the podcast. He listens to the podcast, but long before that, he has done several projects for me at my home, at our business, and the dude just does an awesome job. One of the things I really like about him is it's basically just him and someone that helps him. His attention to detail is phenomenal. The work is always high quality. If you've ever had a fence built, you know that the gate itself and how it opens and shuts is kind of the stamp of quality. It always works well. I've made him make some interesting kind of fencing where it's all horizontal. He had no problems with that, did a great job. And the guy is freaking awesome. He's easy to work with and he does a fantastic job. He's a firefighter. So, you know, he works 2 days on and 2 days off. So he comes in and knocks my project out on the days that he's off. And the dude's awesome. You can find him on our website, overlaplife.com. You can find him on Facebook, CMD Fencing. And let's see, his phone number is 901-484-5546. So if you need a fence, need some fence work, call Chris Drogmiller, CMD Fencing. Hey there. My good friend Steve Bousquet and his partner, Christine Era, the owners of Green Profit Academy, are super excited about a new product they've got coming out. If you didn't know, they're the authors of Profit First for the Lawn Care Business. And it's a book written by Christine Era. Steve plays a big role in sort of adding to that. But they've got that book. It's already out. But if you're an audiobook listener and you just learn better by listening, they've got the audio version coming out. And I think this is really cool. They've got Christine Era narrating the audiobook, and she does a really good job. I've heard some clips of it. It's pretty fantastic. And Mike Michalowicz, the original author of Profit First, he reads the foreword. And so they've got a book launch that's going to come out on their website, Green Profit Academy, and you should stay tuned for more information about that. They're going to have some giveaways. They're going to have some other special deals going on. But the book itself, the audio book, will come out September 12th. So please be on the lookout for that. And if you need some help with Profit First for your green industry business, please give them a call or look them up, Green Profit Academy. Thanks so much.